Hello there, and welcome to a new build guide for Age of Wonders 4. I got you something for the Mystics today, and I felt like it's time to round up a new Dragon Necromancer build for these guys, because I felt like there's just so much fun in combining dragons and necromancy, and it works surprisingly well. I really didn't see it coming. The last time I tried it, it was really good, and here, this didn't let me down either. So, let's get started first with all the moving parts. We go here with the body traits into a package that is well designed for backliners, because the front line of our build is basically all summoned stuff. We're going to go for Arcane Focus for more backliner damage, Pack Tactics, so that when our frontliners surround enemies, our backliners can hit harder, and Cheerful to mitigate the morale difficulties that we will receive eventually before getting ourselves undead. So, cultural wise, I went here for the summoners. Here we go for the Astral Resonance trait in this build, making our undead creatures being strengthened and healed whenever we cast spells. The entire package is built around this idea, and it's quite shocking how well it works when your tier 1 creatures get strengthened all the way down. More about that later. So, trait-wise, I went here for powerful evokers for more spell power on the battlefield. Feel free to interchange that with any shadow trait that you want, or whatever else, because we're really not bound onto the shadow trait here too much. We don't need the shadow affinity too badly, but I went for this one because increase of damage spells is really nice, and an increase of capacity of combat casting abilities is so good for this build to have that right from the get-go, because you are just buffing up your troops like crazy with that. So next up I went for gifted casters to be just able to spam spells whenever I want to. This is quite important as our build is in itself quite mana hungry, so this combination served me quite well. But feel free to change that up, because we're not picking up any affinities that we require for this build via cultural traits, so you are entirely free to mix that up to your own liking. That's a pretty nifty little thing about this build. Tome-wise, I started out with Necromancy, as we are a Necromancer faction, so what's not to like about that? We gain Necrotic Magic to get our tier 1 battle mages to inflict decay, so we have massive access to spreading this damage over time effect right from the get-go, which is really good. It stays relevant all over the game, and it's pretty cool. Skeleton Reanimation is the bread and butter skill for this build. Get it as fast as possible, as well as Soul Collection. I have had so few Necromancer builds that were pulling so much weight around the skeletons compared to this one, so this is really where your game gets started. We are using Necrotize to produce zombies for our everyday Rotting Explosion spellcasting. Rotting Explosion is really good. Just try to put that preferably on your temporary summons and not in the permanent units, because we have so many temporary summons on this build. Now, necromancers are the powerhouse in terms of buffing up your undead, making them even more powerful. Reaching that 5 stacks of strengthened as fast as possible is really easy with this build, and we also can raise undead people after they died. This is either a free zombie unit or a resurrected undead unit of your friendly type. Whatever applies. They're really great with that, but you can only use that once per battle. But necromancers are really good to shift the odds to your favor. I really love this about these guys. And yeah, soul wells for more souls and more mana. What's not to like about it? The other tier 1 we're picking up is Alchemy. Seems like an odd choice at first, but we need this to get our foot into the door for the Tome of Dragons later. But it's also a very viable component of this build. I was quite pleased when I saw how well it worked. Forget about the Afflictors. The Afflictors have no place in this build, because we can't utilize archers too well. It is just what it is. When we reach tier 4, maybe, but honestly, when you have tier 4 reached, you don't need tier 2 archers anymore. Anyways, skip them out. You don't need them that badly. That's the wonderful part. Mysterious Tonic allows your supporters to buff cleanse or debuff cleanse your troops and buff up your own troops at the same time as a free action. It's really, really cool, sprucing up your entire backline with new options, and we have a lot of supporters on this build, so you get maximum advantage out of this. Afflicting Miasma is why we don't need the Afflictors. The neat thing here is the Affliction Cloud weakens the enemy, and then it applies a wild cocktail of different conditions depending on the damage that you deal. Our build deals mostly physical, lightning, and blight damage. So you have 3 different types of damage over time that you can put out quite reliably, which is really, really cool. It is also a fairly cheap spell, which you can just spread out where you need it. It allows you to heal up your frontline and do some mayhem. It's really cool, I like it. It is good enough to skip out the Afflictors entirely. Anti-Magic Tincture comes in when you need some negative status cleansing. We have way too many effects of these. This one shines as being super cheap when you need it. Alchemist's Lab are really massive knowledge cranks. If you put them in the center of a wild mixture of different provinces, they can easily reach 20 knowledge and more. Material refineries add in even more knowledge, so with this book you can easily crank out 20 knowledge more per city, at the very least, with the bare minimum of things. This is really where this book shines for us. It's an economy tome for us, which boosts up our knowledge production. Besides that, it gives us also control over negative statuses, and don't sneeze at this 2 random positive status effects. You can sometimes get really, really good stuff. Tier 2, we pick up Doom Herald as our secondary necromancy tome. This is because the summoner faction that we are playing has no tier 3 battle mage. We get a tier 3 supporter. So having a tier 3 battle mage summonable is really cool for this build, because we can use these. On the downside, we don't upgrade the damage of our battle mages that much, so these ladies here, they don't serve as your classic backliner. They are more like get in there and scream. But it's pretty good. It weakens the enemy, it's shaving off the morale of the enemy, and it also gives them something to focus on. We are here to pick up Cruel Weaponry for our frontline, adding up 30% more damage when the enemy's morale is crumbling. Really good stuff. And Joy Siphoners, making our cultural backline start stealing enemies' morale. This is a really, really diabolical spiral, because you start softening up your enemies more and more with your backlines. Joy Siphoners also means that your backliners start to crit more, which is really, really good. We also can use Cause Despair in combat to reduce enemies' morale to get that 30% damage bonus faster, or Prelude of Doom to put it on the map. Doomed Up Trench is another really, really juicy part of this build. As you see there, we have so many tomes with knowledge production. So you have a really, really good capacity to get into the technology race. All dragon builds want to be quick in technology, and this build can provide. I had a horrible run here, so this is not representative of what you need to see in numbers or turns, but that was mostly me just doing more theory crafting and then playing attentively. Anyways, Revelry Tome is the next one that we're picking up here. I was very, very struck to pick up Mayhem, but Revelry out of several reasons. First up, Revels of Carnage. We use that later to evolve our dragons faster. This is quite important, and it's also very, very helpful out of other reasons that I'll point out later. Scalds make up a nice add-on to your summoners. Yeah, they make people insane. They have nice point-blank support abilities. I love these guys. But you could opt out of these because you have already enough of backbone. But they are fun. They certainly are. Blood Fury weapons for all of your frontliners is a pretty nice little add-on, but not more than that. We are also here for Reveler's Heart, so being undead eventually doesn't hurt your culture that much anymore. And yeah, Carnival of Flesh, if you are... well, forget about it. It doesn't have much purpose for this build. Tier 3, finally your build comes into full gear. We pick up here either Great Transformation or Dragon first. You get to decide. So I'm gonna go over dragons first, as you see there. We gain here young dragons, which will make up your front line from here on. These guys are tier 3 fighters, which get all of the benefits that our enchantments have, and eventually turn into obsidian dragons, which are in all aspect pretty cool units, with the only downside that all of a sudden they're mythic units and they can't be enchanted as other units anymore. Sadly, we don't get to evolve these guys with Astral Echoes, but I'll talk about this in the strategy part later. Purifying Flame, when you need that AoE heal, super costly, but it's full cleanse. We mostly don't need that. But Flamer Focus is one thing that I really like to have, as it gives our cheap battle mages a nuke. You have so easy access to tier 1 mages. Giving this build Flamer Focus is insane, as you easily can just set up a couple of skeletal mages, stack 12 of them somewhere in a province, and let them loose. They will just deal damage, no matter what you do there about it. It's really cool. This build does a lot of, can do a lot with this enchantment. Really good stuff. Draconian transformation only if you don't want to go undead, which I wouldn't recommend to skip on out. It's a major racial transformation, we can't have only one. So yeah, you seriously picked this mostly for these two spells, but it ain't a shame. It really ain't a shame. There's sometimes times when you do this. You also gain the Wyvern Eyrie, which gives you access to Wyvern units, which is not that interesting, but it's another 10 knowledge research post province that you can't build. In all honesty, this tome is memery and in its fullest extent because we're playing a dragon build. There are things that would be more efficient, but I don't mind it. It is providing you a frontline that synergizes with many parts of your build, and this one is really much better than it looks. But the other tier 3 picking up, great transformation, obviously. Whiteborn gives your entire cultural roster now lifesteal. And they're now also undead, which is really cool because that means necromancers can now resurrect them, buff them, all the good stuff. We also gain Fetid Legion, which makes our frontliners even harder to kill, even more debuffing to the enemy, good stuff. Enemy killed tier 5 units give us even more dragons, because dragons are fun. With Domain of Death and Desecrate Structure, we boost up our city stability and soul income, and Necrotic Spires makes it annoyingly hard to kill us. So at that point, we get then into tier 4 area, where we pick up Tome of Calamity to round up our dragon build. Calamity is a super overloaded tome, and reaching this is pretty much reaching the pinnacle of your power. Accursed Projectiles is boosting up everything in your army. Ghost Fire is really cool as it applies damage over time and can't be quenched with water. It doesn't get quenched by freezing damage at this point. And we also gain Accursed Armors to debuff the enemies striking our swarmy guys. The Calamity Dragons make up really massive units, so in the mid and late game you have a swarm of tier 3 to tier 5 units doing the heavy lifting dragon-wise, so that's really cool. And the Accursed Shrine also gives you something to play around ruins. By the way, you can create ruins, and yeah, it's a really good tome. Even Comet of Calamity can be played really well for us. It's a massive nuke, and we have the resources to utilize that to its full extent. And obviously, the other tier 4 to pick up would be Reaper. So you could also go for Oblivion if you wanted to go for a more utility-oriented approach, but I would personally always go for Reaper here into Eternal Lord at the end of the day. Okay, strat-wise, you will not need your city roster too much. The Arcane Guards, you can pretty much forget about them. Skeleton pole arms are way to go. Arcanists, on the other hand, are interesting insofar as they are cultural battle mages. They are really just a frame to put enchantments on, but they gain all the racial transformation things that you put your culture on. Once you have joy siphoners and all the things running on these guys, they are reliable and cheap units to put out, but also, well, it's just like better skeleton mages. That's really not much more to say about them. Tier 2 is where things get much more interesting. Necromancers are, like I said, people to buff up your undead and create a numbers advantage while summoning zombies. Suitors are really important for your build insofar as you need some healers that can do some punctual healing. This is really good. Soothing Breeze does exactly the job. Also, spell channeling is amazing as it makes those spells again cheaper. This culture really, really does a lot of stuff in this regard. Spell shields are cool insofar as they are reliable frontliners. They pretty much fill the gap until you have the tier 3 dragon stuff running, and they are pretty cool because they have a point blank AoE stun, but they have a little bit of a downside in terms of being cavalry, so you need to be careful with the pole-ups. I personally don't like tier 2 shields being cavalry because that puts them in this unfavorable spot where they really die from spears quite easily. Enough about that. Tier 3, you get the summoners. Summoners are interesting, but I personally don't like them in this build too much. The most interesting aspect is that they have Astral Bond, allowing them to bond together with a Magic Origin unit, which gives them a lot of extra power. But, well, yeah, that's about it. Spirit Summoning is more stuff on the battlefield, but I personally think we gain much more out of Scalds. My personal recommendation is to put more faith into these guys. Either way, compose the army to your own liking. The majority of your early game units will be skeletons, skeletons, skeletons. So here comes the point in where we're working with the Astral Echoes. Skeletons are really crap tier units unless they gain experience. The fun part about skeletons is they are low maintenance troops and promoted. As you see there, a fully promoted stack of skeletons has 50 HP more and a grand total of, I think, 3 points of defense and resistance. No, 2 points of defense and resistance more. 20% more damage, you really feel that. But things get even much, much better when we look at Philosopher Soldiers. It does take a while until we get there, but you know, whenever units gain ranks, we gain knowledge. We can generate skeletons dirt cheap. You know, we get them basically for free. So from this point on, once you have the philosopher thingy unlocked, you get to convert your astral echoes directly into knowledge, because you will never run out of skeletons to boost. And then you can send them into the enemy to die. And then you can repeat it, because you don't need to pay their upkeep again anymore. So this build doesn't do that much with their astral echoes in the first place. You also don't use your astral echoes to level up your young dragons, because I don't know why, but the devs decided that the young dragons are no magic origin units, so you don't get to level them up via echoes. But the whole echo leveling shtick is a massive power card to upgrade your skeletons into a different power level. This is really interesting for a necromancer build, much more interesting than I anticipated in the first place. And it's just where you can put your echoes in. But I would even recommend to do the cheesy power play to wait until you have that Philosopher Soldiers upgrade running, because obvious reasons. Now then, apart from that, we'll stay on the Imperium screen for a moment longer. So you also have a good gameplay around city-states, free cities with All-Seeing and Court of Whispers. We can generate extra knowledge here again. We can have a super early access on milking out heroes. I thrive in warfare here. And you also gain a really nice supply of knowledge just out of nothing, so to say, and death magic. Death magic is the point where you can just keep spamming spells basically forever, which is amazing for this build. Seriously amazing. And apart from that, we can go all the way down here with Shadow. And the interesting part about Shadow is that later game you can get super insane heroes with this. And yeah, you have a good knowledge gameplay overall. The biggest challenge for this build are two things: getting your economy running and keeping an army maintained without running out of mana and gold. The thing is, you can create a lot of skeletons out of nothing, but you still will need a lot of gold to get your city economy going. You also want to be able to build those alchemist labs as quick as possible in your cities, expand at the same time while you are doing a lot of war. This is a little bit tricky, and this is where I failed, for example, in this run, but the numbers you see are a mistake of the player. I also must say, the best ruler for this build, in my own opinion, was not a Dragon Lord, but I would totally vouch for a Wizard King, because being able to cast two spells in one turn is just a game breaker. The Death Knight class, though, which will be introduced with the next iteration of the Tiger update, currently playing the beta, is amazing for this build. You get access to undead, and you have a good fighter, so it's basically like a mage summoner. It's amazing. I really like that. Apart from that, I really would recommend sticking to either Ritualist or Death Knight, whatever gives you more control over summons, because it just helps a ton. Roster-wise, this build sets itself up with a at least 50% mixture of supporters and frontliners and other backliners. So basically, well, let's say 40% supporters, then some battle mages and some frontliners. Your heroes can be either nukers from the backline, or I personally love to put the heroes on the frontline task, because this build takes a pretty long time until it manifests some serious badass frontline. And, you know, putting heroes on that task works out a charm for me. Whatever you do, just try to maintain to keep your head above the water when it comes down to the knowledge income. As per usual, this is one of the most important things. The tricky part here is, though, that you need to put it down into provinces and city improvements that are quite costly. And traditionally, the arcane culture has a little bit of a problem with their gold income. This is something where this build is quite special. As you see here, my wallet is full, and I could have been much further if I just would have bought buildings. This comes because you don't need to recruit much. You just recruit a handful of suitors, necromancers, and as you see, necromancers are really cheap dudes. And after that, you just have a demand on tier 3 summon supporters later, and the rest you do all with just soul economy by resurrecting skeletons. Later, you will summon those banshees with mana, but altogether this build is really good at funneling the gold into the city economy development, which is, for mystics, a wonderful thing. So, try it out. Dragon Necromancers are, insofar, interesting as they utilize the extreme swarminess of the Necromancers to get the build rolling over the early phase, where dragon builds usually suck because they're just gosh darn slow. We also have a really good knowledge gameplay with the necromancy and alchemy thing, and good status control. So overall, I really like this build for what it does. You can just stomp the world quite easily with it, and it has a sick mid and late game, especially since Philosopher Soldiers gives you the ability to just print knowledge at a certain point and boost yourself way beyond measure. It's pretty cool. So, thanks for watching. Leave me your comments down below. Let me know what you want to see next. I really am always all ears to hear your ideas and wishes. Leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and check out the description box. Feel free to support the channel financially, and as per usual, many thanks to all of you supporting, and many thanks for watching this video. up until the very end. Hope you had a good time, and see you soon. Bye bye.